Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, I just want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. Very impressed with the work that our almost 100% volunteer fire companies did last night fighting this fire. But I want to speak here on behalf of our township manager, Chris Chrisman. We're here with two elected officials. We have Commissioner Bill Ball, represents Ward 13, and Vice President of our board, Matt Behe, who represents Ward 12. Both are representing a lot of the residents that live in the area that was impacted today. Joining me this morning is Chief of Police from Cheltenham Township, John Slavin, excuse me, and Chief of Police in Jenkintown, Tom Scott. We have Tom McEnany up here. He is our Emergency Management Coordinator. Mike Jones, our Fire Chief from Abington. Keith Maslin, our Fire Chief from Weldon Fire Company. And we also have Chris Platts here, our Abington Township Fire Marshal. So last night at approximately 9:35, we received calls, 911 calls of an explosion. Within 10 minutes, Chief Glenside Weldon Fire Company arrived on scene, and they were met with multiple explosions, and they quickly entered to make sure there were no employees inside. We learned later that approximately 60 employees were inside, and by the grace of God, not one of them was injured, and they were able to evacuate. This quickly escalated from Weldon Fire Company to multiple alarms. 1 in the morning, a fourth alarm went out, but within 30 minutes we had a second alarm, and we had 68 different fire companies arrive from around the area. So at this point, there were no injuries to any responding personnel, although we're not sure with those hazardous materials that all of our first responders were exposed to. Thankfully, nobody needed to be treated, but we just have some concerns about that. We put a shelter-in-place order out within 1 mile radius, and that still is in place now. On location in Glenside, we still have Aqua, SEPTA, we have the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and the federal EAP is down there. We also had responding the Bucks County, Montgomery County, and Chester County's Departments of Public Safety join the efforts down there. Hazmat teams and DEP personnel are still monitoring the air and the runoff water at the scene within that 1 mile zone. They had not detected any threats to the public at this point, so thank God for that. All of the tests so far have been coming out negative. The monitoring will continue in the coming days, and we will continue to cooperate with our partners in public safety, the ones who are represented up here this morning. So we have fire experts up here, we have fire marshals, elected officials. If there are any questions that you have, I just want to provide you with a brief overview of the response last night. I could not be more proud of the efforts of our paid and mostly volunteer fire personnel who really fought this fire all night and are out on the scene continuing to fight this fire. They're doing amazing work, and can never take them for granted, so very appreciative of that. Yes?
Is the fire out?
No, it's still smoldering, and they're still actually fighting it and trying to keep it contained. So
we have it contained to the center of the building.
Can you talk more about your concerns in terms of the hazmat realm, in terms of the air quality, and then the concern with anything getting in the water supply?
I'm going to turn that over to one of our fire chiefs.
We have pre-planned that building over the years multiple times, and we were aware of what chemicals were in there. We had concerns that if some of the heat treating chemicals were to mix, they could form arsenic, which could be in the air and the smoke that was coming off of the fire. So we erred on the side of safety, shelter in place to make sure that didn't happen. We also knew where the chemical and heat treating areas were inside the building, and we concentrated our efforts to keep the fire away from those chemicals. And so far, it has worked out for us.
And early results of air quality and then water testing shows that there have been no chemicals.
Correct. It's continuous monitoring of the air and of the water that's running off from the fire, and right now there's no hazardous chemicals that we can report.
And then what's your timeline for the future testing to ensure, in the next few hours or days that they're...
We are confident that most, if not all, of the runoff is held on site in retention basins and in holding tanks. The floor drains in the chemical areas drain into those tanks, so the creeks and the water supplies around the site are not affected.
We had heard that there was a chemical explosion back in November. Before you had mentioned that, and I was curious if there was any indication whether this was connected to the same source of that and whether you guys responded to that.
It's really too early to tell.
Do we know where exactly? I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning. Do we know exactly where the fire started?
We do not. It was already well involved inside the building on our arrival.
How many employees were inside?
60.
60.
Were they able to self-evacuate the room?
Yes, correct.
Can you get back to how many responding fire departments in the area? Was it 60, 60?
68.
68.
Yes.
68. And then in terms of the school districts in the area that are closed, is that a direct result of the concern for the air quality, water runoff, things of that nature?
Correct, and all the firefighting gear, apparatus, and hose that's still in the area. That would be impossible for a lot of the kids to get out and get to school. But yes, err on the side of safety to make sure that the air quality and the water runoff is not harmful.
Do you anticipate if future tests come back today positive, so that there are not any contaminants found in the water or the air, that school would resume in these districts tomorrow, or would they be held off until future testing?
The plan is to open schools tomorrow.
That's the goal. We will continue to monitor to be sure that it's safe before. That decision is made in conjunction with the school districts and the private schools.
And prior to you mentioned adding compassionate conduct drills and work inside their areas. Do they have any fighters or anybody on premises just through the company?
Yes. SPS Technologies does have a fire brigade that was on site at the time. I believe all 3 shifts there was a fire brigade on site.
So they responded first and then they called you?
Yes, they were in the building and responded first, and they're the ones that, several employees called out for 911 for our assistance.
I would imagine, just given the chemicals and everything, that they do have protocols in place. I mean, just how did this, can you talk a little bit about the phases of how this breached those protocols, or, what beyond the capacity that they were able to?
I believe when the explosions happened, I'll let the fire marshal talk more about that.
Yeah, when it comes down to the protocols and things like that, SPS Technology does have their own protocols in place and standards and procedures that they follow. It's extremely early in the investigation to figure out at what point, if anything, did work well or didn't work well, to even assess where we're at. As they mentioned before, we're still under the fire suppression efforts right now. The investigation of the incident hasn't even started yet.
Was the fire contained to, I know it's a large warehouse, was the fire contained to a portion of the warehouse? Did it destroy a lot of that warehouse?
There's significant damage throughout.
So no idea on when the building will reopen?
No, we can't provide any sort of data on that yet.
And can you talk a little bit about what they do, what they manufacture?
To my understanding, SPS manufactures fasteners and other type of small metal equipment for aerospace and other sort of industries in that nature, and there are chemical processes involved in that.
And it's a big employer for this area?
Yes, it's a large employer in the area.
Any idea for how much longer that shelter in place, the mile radius, will be in place? You said it's currently still.
The shelter in place is still intact right now, and it's going to remain there until we can determine that it is safe, and partnering with our agencies of the EPA, the DEP, the hazmat team to assess are there any ongoing risks. That'll be a joint decision that's made through the coordination between those entities.
And can you expound, or one of you expound on what that shelter in place means? If people live in that radius, should they stay inside? If they own a business, should they not open the business?
I'll take that one. Well, yes, the goal is to have everybody stay inside. Right now, it's frigid outside, so everybody has their windows shut already as part of their normal daily life. And the thing about heaters and things like that, they recirculate air, so it's very little outside air that should be entering the homes. So that's why we feel comfortable with the shelter in place. As far as businesses go, that's an individual decision for those business owners. But we would caution people to, out of an abundance of caution, if you're inside that mile radius, to remain indoors as much as possible.
I know you don't have a window into the future, but how long would you anticipate the shelter in place remains?
We can't really put a time on it. So the key is we're still fighting this fire. It's still actively burning. So we are constantly reviewing our plans and re-reviewing the progress that we're making in that firefight. And once we get to a point where we feel the fire is contained enough in areas that aren't involved in some of those chemical areas where we have been able to contain it away from that, in conjunction with discussing with DEP, EPA, and our hazmat teams. At that point, we'll be able to make a better evaluation. But as far as putting a timeline on it, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a timeline on it right now.
I'm sorry, can I just make sure I understand? You guys have contained the fire in areas that are not the chemical areas. So like the fire hasn't gotten into those areas where the chemicals are. Am I understanding that correctly? I want to make sure. It briefly got into some of those areas, but we were able to, like as Chief Jones said, the majority of our efforts were concentrated on protecting those, so we were able to extinguish that about as quickly as possible.
How challenging were the firefighting conditions, given the size of the fire, the cold, the wind, and the potential for chemicals?
The cold and the wind definitely didn't help. The conditions were like 30, 40 mile an hour winds. I didn't see what the winds were, but it definitely made it up the degree of difficulty in fighting this type of fire. In addition, the fire was the building was well involved on the first unit's arrival, so it had a big head start on us. But we our first job was to make sure that the employees were evacuated. We were in life safety mode. Searches were conducted immediately, and then once everybody was accounted for, that's when we reevaluated our options and changed tactics as needed.
From where we were, it looked like at one point this morning, some of the fire crews were relieved maybe, or maybe moved to a different area. Is that the case? Like, did you pull some units?
Yes, that's normal in a fire of this magnitude. The original crews were out there at 9:05 last night, pushing on 10 hours at this point of heavy lifting. So we have that's where 68 fire companies we all work mutual aid. So we are in the process of trying to relieve some of the initial crews, which are the kind of the hometown and close to us type of crews, so that they can go home and rest, because we anticipate them having to come back and relieve the crews that came to help.
Could you also talk about how the extreme cold affected the firefighting effort?
Well, yeah, so obviously when we're flowing that much water, a lot of ice, a lot of firefighters covered in ice last night, which, we fight these types of fires in this type of weather often, but not for that type of longevity. So it's not, it's not like we're in Buffalo where they see this as a daily occurrence. So it's a little different for us, but we were able to get, Public Works from Abington, They were right on top of it, brought out salt crews and things like that to try and mitigate some of the ice and things like that, so that,
And the local businesses opened up their doors.
yeah, actually, yeah, some of the local businesses, the Highland Restaurant in particular, allow us to use their restaurant right across the parking lot as a command post all night. So we're extremely grateful for that, because we were able to have crews in there as well.
Is it unique that we're almost 10 hours into the beginning, or 10 hours from the beginning of this fire, and it is still not out? Does that speak to the unique situation of the chemical component with this fire?
It's not the chemical component plays into it, but it's a large old building. So it's old materials inside, old building materials that once they hit their ignition point, it's tough to slow it down. And then you throw in the weather conditions and things like that, and it just increases the degree of difficulty for everything involved. At one point, it's a very large building. I don't know if you see it from the drone and helicopter footage. The center of the building, the roof was on fire, and that area is beyond the range of any of our master streams from the ladders and things like that. So, we were putting as much water as we can on it, but during that period, that's when we were particularly concentrating on that area where the chemicals were, because the master streams were having trouble reaching the fire.
So the area where the chemicals were was, from what I'm gathering, in more of the center part of the building?
No, they were more on the outside.
Okay.
So that's why we were able to protect them.
Got it.
What is the plan in the coming hours today?
Yeah, we continue to fight the fire until we can, get it under control and extinguished. Continuing air monitoring, continuing monitoring of the water system and things like that to ensure that there's no runoff, no hazards to anybody within that radius that's trying to play.
My understanding is they've been operating out of the building for like more than a century. The age of the building, I mean, I assume it's not the over the years, but the age of the building, faster and fire and sort of challenge.
I would say that it did help. They have modern safety equipment in there. They have a fire brigade in there, things like that. But as I said earlier, in any old building, once you get to certain parts where it's old building materials, it gets ahead of you. We do what we can.
I know you said 68 departments. Can you give us a sense of just individual firefighters? How many were out there helping?
Hundreds? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Hundreds.
Works, thank you.
And just lastly, should people do anything differently about the drinking water? I just want to get back to, I think the overarching concern seems to be hazmat, air quality, and then any chemicals potentially in the runoff. Should they do anything differently until they get the all clear from you?
No, the water intakes for Aqua that services this area are upstate. So there's no hazard that we're worried about as far as drinking water goes.
You asked a question earlier, we're very fortunate that no first responders were injured, and we had no employees injured, but 500 employees worked at that, and that's been like part of the fabric of Abington community, and I know the commissioners are here, ever since I was a rookie, just like, they were just really good paying jobs, and they're doing some really important work, with the military and also commercial aerospace industry. So the impact on a lot of lives is significant. And again, I just want to reiterate the incredible work that our volunteers and the Abington Township staff and all our partners coming together to make sure that we are on the side of caution. We're constantly in communication with the school superintendent, not just in Abington, but the chiefs of Stephen County, Cheltenham, also talking to their respective superintendents to make sure that we don't bring people out unnecessarily into that zone. But we're confident, I think, after consulting with the DEP, EPA, Aqua, that we can get back up and running soon, hopefully within the next day or so.
Just one other thing, Septum's a great partner in this because we had to shut down not only the West Trenton line, but also the Doylestown Lansdale line. It literally comes right through the borough of Jacob. So that process, working with our partners like that, and having their commitment to help us make sure we're keeping people safe, especially going to work today. You can imagine people trying to get on the train to go into town and not being able to use their normal pathway to the city.
And that's partly because the tracks run right by that scene?
Yes.
Because the Glenside Station's situated a little bit away from the scene, but the train tracks run right by it.
Both the West Trenton line and the Lansdale to Doylestown line, literally, they come together right outside the Jamestown station. So that is the reason why we had to make that decision.
I promised some of these guys deputies that I get them back within a half an hour.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any other questions, we'll be hanging out for a couple of minutes anyway.